All right, we are live. So thank you everybody for joining us for this edition of the PhysEd Summit. This session is all about yoga and the tools for a fun physical education class. So today we have Krista Strayer with us, and she's going to be telling us about yoga and how she uses it in physical education class. But before we get started, I just wanted to give a couple quick reminders. If anything happens to the toggle for some reason, it freezes up on you. If you refresh the toggle, sometimes that will help. And also, if for any reason we get kicked out of this Hangout, then I will create a new Hangout, and I'll put that link in the toggle. So just hang in there, hang with us, and we will get those fixed. Sometimes we have some technical issues. I don't foresee any, so hopefully we'll be technically sound during this presentation. So without any further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Krista, and she can tell us all about herself.
Great, thanks, Jorge. It's great to be here with you guys. I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive right into the presentation. And I am going to ask you along the way to go ahead and put some questions in the chat box and some answers. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible so that you are getting the information that you need. I can go on and talk forever about what I think you want to know, but I'd rather know what you want to know. So I'm going to ask you along the way, and yeah, so feel free to put some answers there in the chat box and any questions that you have. All right, so my name is Krista, and I have been a yoga teacher in schools for just about 10 years now, and teaching everything from preschoolers to high schoolers, and teaching yoga and wellness for teacher support, and just sharing my passion for yoga in schools to help teachers and students create a better learning environment. And to come away from school still feeling their bodies and not being disconnected from their bodies, and trying not to forget this. As an adult, there's so many instances of where we're just not connected anymore to that natural intuition, that check-in that we have when we were younger. So as I kind of go through this first part, I'd love for you to just do a little bit of a check-in in the chat box and let me know what age that you work with, what age you're teaching, if you have any yoga experience, and any goal that you have for our session today. So I will chat for a bit while you guys are writing that in, and then I'll go through that so we make sure that we are answering everything that you guys want to know. The goals for me on this session is to kind of give you an outline for how to set up a class and tips to make it fun. And so you can learn from my mistakes of what not to do. And if you want to if you want to keep teaching yoga in your school and have it be a mainstay in your school program, there's a few kind of hot buttons and push buttons for parents that just to stay away from. And the other goal is to get this information across when we're not actually physically in the same room. Typically, I give this workshop live, and so we're actually doing the poses and learning experientially, I guess the word is. So you feel free if you want to get up and get out of your chair and move around and try out the poses. There'll be pictures of a lot of the poses as we go along. So feel free to make this experiential. The more you move and do it, the more that you will remember it. So I give you free liberty to stand up and move around and act out everything that we're doing so that it stays fresh in your mind. My yoga kids, or my training for kids yoga is through Yoga Kids, and it's a very experiential movement philosophy. And I'm sure you guys are all being keen into PhysEd or all spokespeople for that as well, that we could actually teach the whole curriculum through gym class, right? We could teach everything through movement and it would stick with kids a lot longer. So feel free to move. Okay, so we are going to set up a class. Now, first I'm just going to do a little bit of a check-in here. Hang back to my screen to see if you guys have put anything in that chat box. Sorry, that doesn't work.
I could read some of the responses if you'd like.
That would be great. That would be easier.
Okay, so
let me turn that guy off.
K through 5th, very little yoga experience. We have K through 5. Teach K through 5 in adapted PE. Middle school. Let's see. How do you get middle school boys interested in yoga?
Good one.
Middle schoolers, how do you get middle schoolers interested in yoga? There's another comment. Very little yoga experience, but such a great health benefit to yoga. Let's see. Teach high school wellness and aerobics. Has taken yoga in college. Let's see. Another one. It says, how do you engage preteens in yoga?
Mm-hmm.
K through 5 started teaching one pose per day. I like that.
Great philosophy.
Let's see. Oh, it keeps popping me up to the front. Okay, another PE teacher teaches second, fourth, and sixth, looking for new ideas.
Okay, those are great. And we kind of have the whole gamut from K through 5 to middle schoolers to high schoolers. And that's perfect. So what we're going to show you today is kind of a basic sequencing outline. And this works for all ages. The caveat on that is the younger ages, you don't have to stick to it as strictly as the older ages. Because the younger bodies are just far more malleable and flexible, that it's not as much of a concern that I'll take a little bit of liberty to how I plan a class based on kind of the story that we're going to go through and so forth. But for the teens, getting into the older middle schools and the teens, you do kind of want to follow the sequencing that is basic to like an adult yoga sequencing. And every different flavor of yoga actually has different interpretations of the sequencing, but they're all pretty much along the same guideline. And it basically just follows a general flow of energy, build up and use within the body. Now, exactly, so this is not written in stone. So you can make exceptions to this, and I'll talk about some reasons why you want to do that. But again, so for younger kids, you can be really flexible. Older kids, you kind of want to follow this sequence so they're not going to get hurt in class. And so we're going to go through these different kind of phases. So we're going to be almost like you're putting together a class. And if you guys are close to a printer and you can print out the handouts there. So on your Tozzle screen, there's a bunch of links to the side there, and one of them is the handouts for this. And so feel free to download that document. I guess it's in the document section there, and you can fill it out and add your comments to that as we go along if you want to make that, or just grab a piece of paper and you can kind of go through that afterwards. While I'm mentioning that Tozzle link, there's also a link there for follow-up. So I will send out some follow-ups from what we've talked about today. And if you'd like to receive those, you can click on that. I think it's the bottom link of all the link sections there to get the follow-up sequence. All right. Yes, and as we go through this, we're going to talk about the poses and also talk about some of the safety impacts and the hot buttons in the schools. And we'll work in some of those middle schools and high schools and how to get boys integrated and just some fun ideas along the way as we kind of go through this. All right. Actually, just to go through it, we're going to start off with, this is basically the sequence that I would do in adult class, and how I kind of start the structure with for my kids and youth and teens. And so you'll have some opening where we're going to do some breath awareness and introduce the theme and kind of warm up the body. And then we go into standing poses, which is all about body awareness. So just kind of getting us present in our body so we know where we are, and we start connecting the muscles in the brain and all that kind of thing together. This is also where we do a lot of focus poses, so that the poses that are going to be really good for those kids that have difficulty focusing and so forth. That's going to help all the way through the rest of your class to have them in that focus zone. They're also really good poses to just pick out one or two of when you need to bring the class down into that zone. And they're going to be strengthening building poses. Then we're going to go into the back bends, which is typically the energizing poses and the ones that are really good for our posture, because we typically spend our day hunched over. For adults, it's hunched over the computer and the steering wheel. For kids, it's hunched over their computer games and their desks and so forth. And then we'll talk about some inversions and what that looks like in schools, and some core strength poses. Inversions are huge core strength, but we'll also talk about ones that you can get some core strength without that inversion aspect of it. Twists are all about changing gears. They release and stretch the muscles out, and again, they're really good for our posture. So they're good posture breaks if you're teaching other classes besides phys ed as well. The forward bends are our cool down poses. So good for towards the end of a yoga class, also good towards the end of whatever you're doing in gym class, right? You can take out this aspect of a yoga class and calm the kids down before they head back to their classroom. One of the common issues that I get from classroom teachers that aren't gym teachers is that one of the problems that they have is when kids come back from phys ed, they're all really wired up, and so it's hard to get them back into that learning mode. And they tend to get wired up, and then they get emotional, and then they get, somebody pushed somebody on the way back to the classroom or all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good strategy for calming down for anything that you've been doing in gym class. The relaxation pose at the end is all about hitting the save button, kind of integrates all the movement that you did and all of the educational aspects that you linked in. It kind of helps save that within the body. And then how to actually close the class and send the kids on their way. All right. So diving into this opening sequence, and Jorge, feel free to interject anywhere along the way. If there's questions, just feel free to interrupt and pop those in. That's
Okay,
totally fine.
I'll keep an eye on that for you.
Thanks. All right, so in the opening, I like to start with the breath. And there's different philosophies on how you open a kid's class. Some teachers find it really good just to run the kids wild for a few minutes and wear off that steam and then bring them in. I find personally that if I do that, I don't get them back. And so if I start the class wild, there's a wild theme to the whole class. So I like to have them come in and have a moment just to collect themselves and start at a kind of a more peaceful note and a connected note. But both philosophies work. It just depends on your style as a teacher. So I like to open with some breath awareness. And so the first picture that we have here is of a little girl doing the, what we call the take 5 breath. And so you're simply taking, so everybody, let's just do this one. So kind of sit up nice and tall, roll your shoulders back. And it works for young kids and older high school kids. And you'll just do it in different formats. So with the younger kids, I take a deep breath out. Always breathe out to start. And then you're going to breathe in and just counting with your fingers, breathing in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and breathing out for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we'll only do one round of this because we've got lots of stuff to do, but I would typically do about 3 or 4 rounds with the kids. But I want you just to check in and notice, A, was that hard to breathe into 5? And B, what did that feel like afterwards? So a lot of times when we're starting out working with kids, 5 is too much. That you might, and even with adults that I work with, you might only start out with breathing into 3, right? Typically I go with age. We're working with 2-year-olds or preschoolers, it'll be breathing into 2 and breathing out to 2, or getting a little bit, older. But typically I've started everybody, even my teens, were breathing into 3 and out to 3 to start off with. Because there is a little bit of anxiety to go more than what we're used to. However, as you're working with kids, that will change. I've had preschoolers, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds that will, it's like, Miss Krista, let's go to 7 today, or let's go to 8. And so you might, count a little bit faster, but they're totally capable of getting that expanded breath in once you've been working with them. It's a way that I find that I settle myself before the class, as well as getting them kind of linked into that. You could also use this as a way to, introduce your theme and setting the intention from the class. So you can do your breathing in and breathing out, and then give a few words as to what the adventure you're going to have or what you're going to work on. For older, for mid-schools and teens, it might be more of a focus. Okay, today we're going to focus on core, or we're going to focus on, poses that give us energy, poses that relax us, whatever that focus is going to be for that, the intention of your class. For take 5 breath, you can also use it to kind of, enter into that realm of the imagination. So as you're breathing in real nice and deep and breathing out, just allowing yourself to imagine that you're going on a journey. Oh, one more thing to take 5. With them working with older kids, you wouldn't actually have your hand up there and count, right? You just count silently in your head, or use that counting as a focal point for them to focus their awareness on. With athletes that you're working on, and this is how I would really work to get those middle school kids in there. A lot of them are focused on their school sports, whether it's soccer or hockey or whatever that whatever the flavor that they like to. A lot of athletes like to do yoga or have yoga as part of their core practices now. So I actually find my middle school boys can be far more interested and pay attention in class more than my middle school girls will be, because the girls are more worried about what their peers think of how they look in the pose, whereas the boys are typically very concerned or more keen to look at it from an athletic point of view. So you can talk about how the breathing really increases our lung capacity. So there's stories about how, athletes and, yogis that just practice the breathing aspect of yoga can increase their lung capacity like a marathon runner. And so it's just giving that increased lung capacity gives more oxygen that's going to fuel our muscles, and so give you more power and stamina as an athlete. So huge, huge key there for athletes. And then just being present, right? Just getting that awareness of the body and the breath as we start out. And that's kind of what sets yoga apart from other forms of exercise, because a lot of the moves are the same. You'll notice that a lot of yoga things are the same that you would do in a gymnastics class, or the same that you might do in some martial arts. And the martial arts has that same aspect of keying into the breath, which is what makes them both so powerful. So other poses that you might do in your opening would be something like this cat-cow pose. So this is the cat version of it, and then as you wind the spine down and look forward, you have that cow version of it. And it's just kind of getting the blood flowing along the spine. And so the reason why you do some of these things is to just to warm up the spine and get it ready to move, okay? And here's a version of the lying down butterfly. You might do the sitting up butterfly or the lying down butterfly just to kind of get yourself ready to start there. Another great one to do is the sun salutation. So on the handout for the program, there's a whole little opening sequence that you can do, including a little stick figure guided sun salutations. And I won't have you guys get up and do that one right now, just for time's sake. But this, when you're only doing half-hour classes, and even an hour class, this is a great way just to get the body warmed up so that it's safe to go into some of the stretches that you do with the kids. And it's that way to kind of get the heart rate up and going. And you can add some extra challenge into that for the middle schoolers and the high school students. So sometimes if you have groups with lots of boys present, you want to really make it hard to start off so it grabs their attention. I walked into a class, this is a few years ago now, back when I first started teaching in schools, and it was a yoga for, or it was a athletes class. It was a gym class just for athletes. And so it was 97% boys in the class. And their coach or their teacher hadn't actually told them they were doing yoga that day. It was like the surprise, so they would all show up. So they all walked in and went, "What? Yoga?" And you could see on their face, like, I would have skipped if I'd known this is what the class was going to be today. This is going to be so lame. And so we started off with really serious sun salutations. And you can Google that or look for flow or hot flow or challenging sun salutation sequences. And you're going to go into lots of what they call chaturanga, when you're kind of going to that plank pose, they call it a lot, when you're kind of lowering down really slowly to the ground and then lifting yourself back up again, taking one arm plank and things like that to make it hard for that extra challenge. And then you'll get their attention really quickly. So if you make it really hard to start, they'll be tuned in like, oh, okay, there is something to this. So that's another good technique for that. Okay, so just some kind of, yep.
Sorry about that. So there's a comment on the toggle I wanted to mention. It's Jenny said that her son is a baseball catcher in a Division II school, and he does yoga as part of his training routine. And I think that's kind of interesting that a lot of elite athletes do yoga as part of their training routine.
It is such a valuable tool for them, and I find that athlete link for sure is a way to connect with kids these days, because a lot of kids are pretty serious into their sports. And a lot of kids now, over half the class when I go into a school typically has done yoga at some point in time, either with their teachers or with their sports teams. And so that's pretty good to see.
Yeah, and there was another question. Do you recommend projecting videos as a visual aid?
I would prefer not. A lot of the feedback that I've got from kids in school is like, oh, yoga was so lame, we just watched this video. If you can do it live with them, it's going to be far more powerful than just doing it along with a video. So hopefully these tools that we'll talk about today will give you some keys and some inspiration on how to do it live. I've also got lots and lots of resources on my website, and those are on the links in that Tazla page as well, on keys to kind of get you started and how to, some class plans and some things like that to go forth and to be able to do it live. So preferably doing it live as opposed to putting the videos up goes over better with kids. The live aspect is so huge. And also, too, it gives you the opportunity to have them have input. That's another one of that youth age in the middle school, particularly. The younger kids love to have input, but it goes out of control really fast. The middle school, and it makes it really easy for you to direct the class. They love to have input on how the class goes. So you can just kind of get it started, and they will have all kinds of ideas on what poses to do and how to, put the class together, and they'll be far more engaged with it. High school kids, I find not so much. They're there to kind of zone out and relax, and they don't want to interact with each other. They're far more aware of what they look compared to their peers and that type of thing, and they're just needing the chance to relax. They want to turn their brain off for a bit. But the middle school group, it's a great way to make an interactive class with them, and I'll give you some ideas on how to do that too as we go along. Good. Anything else, Jorge?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for interjecting that. All right, so then going into standing poses, okay? And so this is where you will get into things like triangle pose, which is this first one here. And this is where you may start to get into some alignment, depending on the age. So for younger kids, we want to make it fun and not be picky about alignment, right? So however their triangle looks is going to be just fine. For older kids, it's sometimes fun to do this pose up against a wall so they can feel where their body is. And actually, any age, it's fun to do it up against a wall. But for the older kids, pay more attention to where does your body look in space, and then move away from the wall, and can you make it look like that again? So ideally, when you start this pose, like she'll be up, in a T position, and then going down so that your whole body is back up against the wall, and then you just kind of hinging over so that you're staying in that position. So you can start to bring some alignment in. Again, when we work with kids in yoga, we're not going to be as particular about alignment because we want to keep it fun, but it is good for them just to develop that body awareness of where their body is in space. So to kind of just pay attention, like look at your bottom hand, look at your top hand, are they in line? Younger kids, even older kids, you can give them that cue, like how many triangles can you find in triangle pose, right? And what are the names? So you have your equilateral down here. She's not quite, I guess our angle is not quite right to show that. You have your scalene one in here, and you have your isosceles one right up here. You can tell I used to be an engineer. I get keyed into all that kind of stuff. But you can add some learning and some curriculum learning into poses like that as well. Our warrior poses, this is a warrior one pose where the boys are in here. These are great for empowerment. And I have a blog post on my website there that you can refer back to and how strong these are. These are power poses, right? The more you get your arms up there and make your body as big as you can, they're really empowering and enlightening poses. So that's a great way to link into that. And I often have the kids yell out words like, I am strong and I am brave, and have them think of words, have good warrior quality words to be yelling out. And so bringing them into the class and having them make the class their own by doing things like that. You can read all about that on that blog there. And then all these balancing poses. Whenever we're standing on one foot, it means we're doing different things on different sides of the body. So you're getting that brain gym aspect into that. And really good focus pose. This one here that we have the picture of is dancer pose, which this is a pretty serious version of dancer pose. So if you're working with groups of gymnasts and dancers, they will be able to get into this. You may not as a teacher, right? So that's totally okay to have your leg way down here. On that, there's all kinds of examples of that in balancing sequence. If you just Google balance on my website, there'll be all kinds of variations on what to do with that. One fun thing to do with the balance poses is to hold them, or a couple ways to do them is to hold them while you count, right? So have them focus on counting up to 10, or counting in Spanish, or counting in French, or whatever that is, or counting by 5s or 10s. Another one is to ring a chime or a bell and hold the pose as long as you can hear the sound. And so that really quiets the whole class down and kind of makes it into a game for them to do that.
So, Krista, we have a question that I think fits in well with these standing poses.
Mhm.
Um, do you think mats are necessary to do yoga?
Good one. So the mats for yoga, they're called sticky mats because your feet stick to them. So when we do these standing poses, it means that there's not a danger of our legs, slipping apart and like stretching a groin muscle and things like that. So that's the safety aspect of the mats. The other aspect that I love about the mats is that it gives kids their own space. And so, particularly if you're doing warrior poses, that they're not going to start attacking each other in warrior pose and things like that. And if they're falling over, it gives them a little bit of room that they're not going to be knocking into somebody else typically as they do that. So I use the mats as a class management tool that the kids have to stay on their mat. Their mat is their island. They do their pose. What they do in their island is their own island. It doesn't matter if you look like the person next to you and all of that kind of stuff. So I do use mats, and I would encourage you using the gym mats that the puffier ones makes these standing poses harder. However, so if you don't have a class set of mats, you can use the gym mats to make it a little bit easier to be on your belly and things like that. However, balancing poses get a lot more trickier, so you may want to have kids stand off the mat to do that, especially when they're learning them, because they will be a lot harder. Another thing, so mats, if you don't have a class set of mats, it could be a really good, fundraiser. A lot of parents likely have an old mat that they're not using anymore. So you get donations like that. You may get donations from stores or a good, just class project to donate. You can get all kinds of mats fairly cheaply nowadays for your mats at school. So that's one thing that I would encourage you to do. For the really, really young kids, you can use half mats. I still use full mats with my preschoolers if I have room in the space, because um, it just gives them more room and more space so that they have that safety aspect. But you can use half mats for that age group. One thing I do encourage with the mats, if you're a gym teacher and you're in a gym and teaching class after class after class, it's a really good way to spread germs. So I have my kids wipe the mats down with a couple of options. If I'm teaching in a community class and I'm not teaching 400 kids a day, I will have washcloths, and we spray them down with a oil, like a essential oil, water, vinegar kind of mix, and we spray the mats down and wipe them down like that. But it's too labor intensive to do that if I'm teaching 600 kids a day or 400 kids a day. If you're running through gym class after gym class, and so I just get from the Costco the unscented, unlotion, no lotion, no scent baby wipes, and I have them wipe down their own mats before they leave the class and the next class comes in. So that's just a hygiene thing, so you're not spreading. We don't want yoga class to be where they caught a cold or something like that.
All right, thank you. So we have another question. Are there any good resources to modify some of these poses for the kids who might not be as flexible?
Absolutely. Well, I shouldn't say absolutely. Good question. Trying to think of where to get resources on that. Um, And I would say one of the best sources of that, and these are not good examples because a lot of my little models on this are gymnasts and dancers. So typically your arm wouldn't be there, but using yourself as a model, I usually show the pose in various degrees of abilities, right? So triangle pose, your hand might be up by your knee. And so just kind of modifying it like that. There is a book, there's one of the classic books for yoga is for adult yoga, but called Yoga for Runners, which the runners are, typically really stiff. And so yoga is a hard one for them to do and get into. And so that is actually a good book and resource for yoga for modifications. I'm going to jot that one down, and if I can think of a good resource for modifying yoga poses, I will add that into the follow-ups of things that I'll send you guys out, or I'll write a blog post in the next little while to give you some resources on that, because that's a great question.
Somebody mentioned yoga blocks. Do you recommend using yoga blocks?
Oh, good one. So I don't use it for young kids because they just become weapons that they throw around. You know, unless I'm working with a class of, you know, an after school class and things like that. If you're working with a yoga club, they can be fun to use. But for my middle school and high school students, I typically use blocks and straps. Those are the two props that I will bring with me into a gym. The blocks, particularly because a lot of, you know, once you know, grade 4 and up, kids can't sit cross-legged comfortably on the floor anymore. They're not that flexible, or a lot of kids. You'll have the gymnasts that their knees are wide and flat and they're totally good, but a lot of the kids, a lot of boys especially, they don't have that flexibility, so that their knees are kind of like up by their armpits almost when they're sitting cross-legged, especially as you go into the high school thing. They've lost that flexibility. So sitting up on a block or a couple of blocks makes that more accessible, so that they can even sit comfortably cross-legged as they're, you know, doing their breathing at the beginning of the class. Plus, you can put your hand on a block in triangle pose, and you can use it for balancing a lot easier. So yes, blocks for sure that I will have, you know, one block minimum per student. And then straps is another great way that if you can't reach your toes, you can kind of bring your toes in towards you a bit more. Really good for working on that flexibility for that. Good suggestion there. So middle school and high school for sure, I would use those.
Could you say the name of that book one more time before we move on?
Yeah, Yoga for Runners.
Yoga for Runners. Okay, I'll type that into the toggle. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the next aspect, so once you've done your standing poses and your balancing poses, so you're standing on one foot, then we're going to go into back bends and posture poses. And it's just having a minute here to load the pictures on this one. And so back bend poses are all about bringing up the energy. And I give a little bit of warning. I always have to warn the teachers that are you know, supervising the class. They always get really upset when we do back bends because all of a sudden the class gets really, really loud. But that's what back bends do. They open up our heart and our emotions.
Krista, I'm sorry for interrupting. But there has been like an issue with the screen share in the last couple sessions, and it looks like we got hit with that issue again. So
Okay.
if you don't mind getting out of screen share and then going back in, usually that'll fix it.
Okay.
Because I can see your screen, but on the toggle it looks like it froze up again.
Okay. Let's give me one moment to.
Okay, I got you back on the toggle.
Okay.
Well, if you reshare your screen, I think we're good to go.
Now let me just see where we're at here. Is that pulling back up again?
No.
No. You know what? Let's go. It could be that I've got a big picture or something in there. Let me just see here. That it's not loading.
Are you sharing your screen? All right, we got it.
Okay. All right, so it's, let me just see if I go backwards. No. Oh, sorry. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you were talking about backbends. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so back bends do open the heart, right? So they will release emotions, and that's what it's for. So kids will often start to laugh and they'll giggle, and that's just what's expected, right? And that's what they're all about, is to allow kids to kind of release emotion. So expect that, live with it, and give them their opportunity, and then bring them back into focus again. So there is a bit of a safety aspect with back bends, and that this is why we want to be warmed up before we do these poses. You wouldn't do these poses the beginning, right? And so you're going to, do some cueing of the kids that you're going to, keep your hands on your hips here. Your really flexible kids will have your hands on your feet for camel pose, things like that. This next one here, this snake, this cobra pose, is a nice, gentle back bend that can be done in different degrees. So we have the girl in the middle here that's just going slightly up, and then you can go up further depending on how you want to go. Then there's other poses, and I apologize, they're not showing up there. I think my file size is too big. They are like wheel pose, which is called bridge pose in gymnastics, that you do have a bit of a safety aspect on, so that you wouldn't do them when you're first working with kids, but as they get more, they're very empowering poses to do these and very energizing. So they're still great poses to do, but you just need to have the kids have the skills to do them before you do that, or to be spotting the kids. So have them have some enough adult supervision that you can spot them when they're doing that.
Hey, Krista, it looks like we lost the feed again.
Okay.
I'm really sorry. So if you could, try doing that again, just going out and coming back in. Hopefully that'll fix it.
Okay.
Okay, back in business.
Okay, you guys can see that?
Thank you. Apologies for that.
No worries. My apologies to the group there. Okay, and then going into the core strength poses. So, oops. You guys still good? I keep hitting that back bend slide, and that's where we've got an issue with the a file that's just not working. Oh, there we can see that rocking horse pose, which is another really good. This is the one where the kids will start laughing, just like crazy, which is always fun to see, but a little bit challenging to go with. And then here's your wheel pose, which is the one that you want to just have some safety aspect with. Some kids can get up to that, no problem. Other kids, I will support them underneath them and help kind of lift them, but keep my arms there so that they're not going to fall on their heads. So that's another advanced pose. If you're new to yoga and aren't familiar with that, you don't have to teach that one. You don't have to go there, right? So that's totally fine until you get some more confidence in your own abilities. All right, and then going into the core strength poses. Now these ones here, I will often actually throw these ones in at the beginning of our class as well, because they help to activate those core muscles, but they can come in the beginning or here kind of right before you're going to run into inversions and going upside down. So this is the plank, the side plank that I love to throw in for the athletes and the boys and the high schoolers to get them really engaged and thinking, because it's a more challenging pose to do. For the younger kids, you can do a pose, and this is called seal, where you're actually going to toss this ball around a circle or pass it from person to person around a circle. That kind of gets them connecting and interacting. And then the typical boat pose here, where you can have your knees bent to make it easier and legs extended. And that, so it's just some good poses. Working on core is really, really important for kids. And then I would typically do these before going upside down. Now the inversions that you might do with a school, and I don't have that slide working here, but would be, so downward dog is an inversion, right? It totally works as an inversion. And I would keep to the same rules that you would do for teaching gymnastics. Sometimes some schools have like a three limbs on the floor, so you could take one leg up in downward dog and things like that to get them going upside down. I do not teach handstands or headstands or anything like that in a school environment. I will teach it for after school classes and stuff like that with kids, but it's just not part of about going into a school. It's just too dangerous to be doing that in a school environment when you've got larger classes.
Okay, so we have a question on the toggle about wearing shoes. Do you allow students to take their shoes off and keep them off?
Oh, absolutely. And part of that is the whole yoga environment that, we do kind of yoga in bare feet. Um, Shoes on the mats can actually rip the mats. So they're not a good idea. You can absolutely do yoga with your shoes on. So if I'm doing yoga in a classroom with kids or like outside or whatever, you can totally do yoga with your shoes on. You can, and I love to have that so that kids know that they can do it anywhere. However, when we go into like doing a yoga class in a phys ed environment type thing, I like to have their shoes off on the mats so that they get that aspect of grounding and free their feet from that, that constriction of shoes. So that they get to spread their toes. The aspect of spreading your toes and connecting your feet to the ground is one of the key things of yoga, that you're actually connecting to the ground and using all the muscles of your feet, which you don't do when you're wearing shoes. So that's my reasonality. You can totally, if you're just doing a few poses after a gym class, you don't have to take your shoes off to do the yoga poses, right? You can just flip the poses in there. But sometimes it's nice to create that atmosphere of yoga by taking off shoes and socks. Some kids do not want to take their socks off. They may have warts or things like that. That's totally okay. Some kids just have texture issues. It is harder to do yoga with socks on. And so on the mats, because your feet do slide. So I do warn them to be extra careful when they're doing yoga in socks, because, in some of the warriors and things like that, their feet will slide and it becomes more tricky. Or in a pose like this little side plank, you need that balancing, that grip action of the feet in there. Typically once kids learn that's harder with socks on, then they'd be okay with taking their socks off. But if there's an issue that they don't want to take their socks off, I don't force it. There's no big deal, right? Okay. Twist poses are really delicious. They are that aspect of changing gears between back bends and forward bends. It kind of releases the muscles before we're going to go in that opposite direction. They are also just really good posture things that if you have kids that are sitting at desks or sitting, seated for a long time, just to go into a twist really helps to free up the spine and gets kind of the blood moving and the brain activating again. So really good for that. But typically we'll throw them in between the back bends and the forward bends to kind of switch gears and go forward from there. All kinds of variations on what you can do. On this one here with the girl in the yellow, get that pointer back out again. This is called deer pose, because you can make little deer antlers with it. And before kids go, it gets your deer pose. This is just like a little seated twist, a really easy one for kids to get into. This lying down twist is really nice, just you're breathing in and breathing out as you take your legs from one side to the other. Really good relaxing to do this right before you're going to go into relaxing pose. Helps to kind of stretch things out. This one I would typically do when we're in the standing poses, just to give them a little break from that. It's called scarecrow twist. Another really good thing for twists is that it really helps with digestion. So it's stimulating all your internal organs through the belly, so it's strengthening the belly and all that type of thing, but it also stimulating the digestive series. So it's really key for that and helping kids out in that regard. And then going into forward bends. And I apologize, I have the wrong, I didn't get the naming on that. These are forward bends and they're for cooling down. And this, we can do a whole workshop. In fact, I teach a whole workshop just on, how do you cool down and how do you calm down in class. But basically you're stimulating the vagus nerve when you do these poses, right? So anytime you're flexing the body in that extreme of a flex, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which stimulates the parasympathetic system, which is a system that calms the body down. And so this is called ragdoll. And this is a boy. I love this pose. He's a hockey goalie, so he can get his fingertips right down onto the ground. Most times, your kids will start off with their, boys especially, will be hands at the knees. That's the way I started before I started doing yoga. My hands were at my knees, and now you can, wrap them underneath your feet type thing. But I always, demonstrate it in the different levels of where kids can go, so they feel like it's okay. Demonstrate the easiest version first, and then going down. And then this one here is child's pose, which is the classic head on the desk pose that we've been using in schools for decades, right? And this one here is river pose, or we often call it peanut butter and jelly pose, and little turtle pose going in there. So all different kinds of ways, and these are just magic at getting kids to calm down. I once was teaching it was a wellness class, or they had like a school wellness day. So the kids were always in middle school, and they were all like totally out of their traditional routine. They had speakers coming in, and the kids were moving from room to room to room. They got to pick where they were going to go, and they were off with their friends and doing things. So super exciting day. But then trying to teach a yoga class in the middle of all this excitement, I had one class that came in that was just like through the roof. I could not rein them in. I could not talk loud enough to get over their excitement. So I just started had them down on the ground and doing, every seated forward bend that I could think of. And within 20 minutes, those kids were quiet as could be. And so when they walked out of that class, I totally like threw out the class plan I was going to do and just brought them right down onto the ground. But at the end of that class, they were just chill. And so they walked out of that room, totally different perspective than when they had walked in. So they are magic poses and what you can do with them. So whenever you're needing that, refocusing or getting the kids to listen or to calm down, these forward bends. So whenever you're like forward and hinging at the hips, that is hinging at the hips and then tucking the chin down towards the neck, that both of those actions will stimulate that parasympathetic response. And then just focusing on the breath when you're in there and focusing on just that strengthening or that stretching aspect. It's just like magic.
All right,
And
so we have a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
So first, do you have any tips? What do you recommend on how to kind of initially sell it to your class, especially some of the boys who might be a little bit less inclined to do some yoga?
I would point out some of the sports figures that are doing it and make it kind of cool that way. I would, and it kind of depends on what age range you're working with on that. You might want to, for younger kids, make it into a game type thing, or just introduce it pretty slowly. Make it into a challenge to see who can, can we, as a class, can we hold it? I like to do things not like, winner or loser, but as a class, can we all hold this pose? Can we keep, silent while we're, standing in tree pose for the count of 10? Things like doing class challenges, introducing it, pretty slowly like that. The kids typically like to relax and like to have that, they have like nap time they kind of think it's kind of cool and fun to be able to do that. I shouldn't say right off the bat they will have trouble lying in relaxation pose, but at the end that's their favorite part of class and they'll just want to do that. So that kind of lures them in. I will use, and I'm going to show this next slide here, you might make a game out of it too. So even something like this, you might be, if you have your legs out wide, you might be, make it pizza pose, and what kind of things can you put on your pizza? That kind of works for different things. Having music, playing music as you do it, will get kids interested, because music just does a whole bunch of things to light up the brain and bring kids in, so they get to listen to music as like an extra bonus to having yoga class. Let me think on that one a bit more, and we'll come back to some more ideas, but that's a good question.
Okay, and also, how long do you recommend holding some of those poses?
And that's going to depend on, you'll increase the length of time that you hold the pose as you kind of build it up. So at the beginning, you might be holding a pose for like the count of 3, right? And then it might be to the count of 10. For kids, I move them in and out of poses really quickly, and we're going to go into that in a minute here. So I'm going to table that one a bit. With younger kids, and even with older kids sometimes, I will link it to a story. And so the amount of poses that you teach in a kids class versus an adult class, it could be, 1.5 to double the poses, because I don't hold them in poses very long. We're going to flow from one to the next pretty quickly. But I also really stay tuned in to where the kids are at. And if they've got questions, or when we're in a pose, we'll be talking about other things. And so bringing in the multiple, okay, I'm going to come back to that one. Let's just table that one for a moment. I'm going to come back. Let's just finish up the sequence, and then we're going to go right into how to, make it fun in going into that.
Sounds good.
All right, so this last part of the class is key, and this is the relaxation pose, which is the hitting save. And I remember in my adult teacher training, there was one lady that always, in adult classes that I was going to during my teacher training, there was one lady that always skipped out, and she was like a high-powered yoga or high-powered lawyer, and she just never had time for the relaxation at the end, which is kind of like what everybody else went for. And she was so wired up that that was the piece that she really needed, right? So if you don't do relaxation afterwards, you actually just kind of ramp up your nervous system and you never get that calm down, like that relaxation or that opposite effect to it. And so it's really important to introduce kids to having time without stimulation. I use music as a key for relaxation in all ages. So it just allows kids to go deeper into relaxation. I often will dim the lights. They love to do that. And I often, for the younger kids, will use breathing buddies. I use this all the way up to grade 6, actually. Grade 4 and up, I don't use them until they actually ask for it. Once they see the younger kids have these, it's like, well, why do they get those and I don't get them? And then I give them the option that if they want the breathing buddy today, their arms are down beside them. If they don't want it, they put their hands on their belly, and I start handing them out as I've put them into relaxation. And then make it a game to see if they can save the suspense and will guess who the relaxation buddy is. So every day it'll be a different one on their bellies. I could just have a whole, it may not be different, but I just pick them randomly out of a bag. And so at the end, they get to guess who it is type thing. Sometimes these can be distracting. You have to watch that, but sometimes it's a really good game and a really good cue to keep them down there. And then I often take them through, I never leave them unless I'm working with a special needs group where they're nonverbally integrated or listening or learners, and that the words just kind of don't mean anything, then I just rely on the music to let them relax. But other kids, I always lead them through, helping them, guiding them to relax their feet and then their legs, and then going all the way up through. There's some examples, I believe, of that on my website as well, how to do that. But then going through a story. So we'll go back through the theme or the story that we did in our yoga class. Sometimes just a squeeze, like when you squeeze your hand and let it go, or squeeze your toes and let it go. That's a really great relaxation technique to do for that. One aspect to remember on this is that relaxation does not, so I've given 2 examples here. These are both on your back. This is reclined butterfly, and this is just what's in adult poses called Shavasana. I don't use the word Shavasana for kids yoga. I don't use Sanskrit names, but I will either call it relaxation pose or siesta pose. These 2 are both on the back. Relaxation pose does not need to be on the back. This is a very stressful position, and for someone who's experienced abuse, it's very open and very vulnerable. So if kids want to lie on their belly or on their side, that's totally fine. There is a reason that we lie on the back. It's optimal because the spine is completely relaxed. It's a neutral position, so nothing needs to work in terms of the bodies. But this may be uncomfortable if you have any low back issues for the older kids or for the teens to do that, and then their knees can be bent. But for any age, it can just be very extremely vulnerable. So just be aware of that and don't ever force. I know some teachers that I've been with have always, oh, it has to be lying on the back, and that's not true. It doesn't have to be. You just want them to be in a position where they can relax. Oh, there's our little inversion picture. Okay. And then as you send them out, so after relaxation, you're just going to slowly bring them back out of that relaxation and hug their knees in, roll over to the side, and come on up to sitting. And then in an adult class, we will typically, take your hands together at your heart and say namaste and bow to each other. This is one of those hot buttons for schools that for a lot of parents, having their child bow to another person or person in authority is not acceptable, and totally, without understanding that it's a mutual sign of respect. When you look at it from the outside, it looks like a totally unacceptable practice, right? And so to honor that, instead I do this little pose called peace breath, where you breathe in, take your hands to your heart, and breathe out, spread your hands and whisper the word peace, or just say silently for older kids the word peace inside. And we'll do that 3 times, bringing peace into our hearts and sending peace out, sharing peace with our classmates. And that's my alternative. And then I just, honor them and thank them for sharing their yoga with me. And then have them wipe down the mats. And if you can, have them quietly go back and put their socks and shoes on. So that's kind of an alternative that's not going to push any hot buttons on that. Okay, so things to make it fun. And so you can incorporate different yoga games in. You can have like, if you play music and have freeze flow, and so like it's kind of like freeze dance, so you're playing the music, and then I'll use like a set of yoga cards, and I love the Yoga Kids cards for this because they're really colorful and they're pictures of actual kids, which go over better with kids than the little cartoon drawings. And it's just easier for them to see what to do when you have those little pictures of actual kids. And great tool for teachers too. If you can't actually get into a pose, like wheel pose, I'll show a picture of the pose and the kids will figure it out from there how to get into it. But so I'll have freeze and flow, and I might, show the picture of when the music stops. I'll give them a few options of which poses that they can, freeze in that day, or you can let them pick their own yoga pose. So music stops and they have to pick a yoga pose. So that's a good fun way for the younger kids to kind of get into it. And even into middle school, if it's a class that knows how to have fun, you can do that as well. You can have stations where they just kind of go around the room in the gym, and you have a picture of the pose on the wall, and they have to hold each pose for 5 breaths, or do each pose 5 times depending on what the pose is like. Stories is a really good way to weave it in and make the class engaging. And this works for all ages. I've used a lot of myth stories for the older kids. Even my adult classes, I'll weave in the myths behind the poses and things like that. You have to watch a little bit in schools. To use the Hindu myths is almost going one step too far. Like a lot of the yoga poses are named after Hindu gods and goddesses and stories in the Hindu mythology, which is fascinating and fun stories. But it can go that one step too far for people to think that it's a religion that you're going into. So you might go to the Greek mythology or Norse mythology instead, or often I will go into a class and work it with the curriculum. So if they're studying Peru, we will go on an adventure and we'll actually go to Peru with our yoga poses and look at the geography there. We'll go and do all the poses of what animals live there, and what kind of things that people do there, what food they eat, and incorporate all that through poses. You might go onto the mountains for skiing or snowboarding, or do an Olympics theme based class or something like that with yoga poses. Trying to think of what else would be good for there. A great way to work it, actually, that I do this a lot with my youth and middle school, is to have them actually make up the sequence. So they have to either tell a story, and like you add a pose on for adding a character in a story, or you just go around and they say their name. If it's at the beginning of the school year, this is a great intro one, where they say their name and do a pose. And then you have to kind of keep remembering as you go around the circle what each person's name and pose was. Like you'll add in, 1, or you add in 3, and then you got to go back and remember those 3 and then add on the next 3. And for you as a teacher, it's a super easy way to make a class plan. The kids all do the poses as they go around the circle. So that's a fun way where they get to have control of the class. I find that really, for the youth ages, that's really important. And then the music, we talked about that. Partners and groups, they love working together. So this is one that we did. It's basically the turtle pose when you link hands underneath your legs and lift up on your legs. So that's a fun one to do. This one is a chimpanzee pose where they're picking off nits and bugs from each other. So that's a fun one to do in class. So anything where they can connect, is the word yoga actually means connection. So anything that we connect, we're trying to encourage them for that. And then another key one, we're running out of time here. So the multiple intelligences, if you're familiar with that, that's the whole key to the whole Yoga Kids philosophy, is working those in. There's lots of information on their website, on my website, on doing that. And that's a great way to get the kids integrated into the class. And just quickly, things to avoid. We talked about the namaste and the bowing. Chanting the word Om is another hot button. Touching, if I can have the kids touch each other instead of me touching them, that works better. And then don't use the Sanskrit names, right? Use the English names, just to try to make the class as inclusive as possible, so that you're not going to hit any hot buttons with any parents and things like that out there, so that you can keep all those great aspects of yoga going on in your school. So a couple things there, I have some links on the side there. I know this is a lot to cram into an hour. I usually teach 3-day workshops and week-long workshops on using yoga with kids. So there's a few other resources that you can have. One is a free resource called the Calm Classroom Guide. That's a great way just to get some ideas at pose of the day, what someone mentioned at the beginning, things like that. That's just a free resource download that you can get on. I have a 21 days challenge that's starting up here the second week of September, so you can join that group, which every day for a month, you will get a different activity of things to do. And so some of those story building activities we talked about are in there. Some music activities and games are all in there. And then if you're looking for more personal wellness and support, they have a Nourish the Teacher program as well that can kind of help to include your, kind of imbue your wellness and your energy levels. Okay, that was really, really quick. Any last questions before we sign off?
No, just thank you so much for all the information. There's a lot of information. So I guess it's up there on the screen right now. So if people wanted to learn more about incorporating yoga into their class, into their school, they could go to flourishschools.com. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's a ton of resources there. So go and check that out and feel free from there. You can email me if you have any other questions and so forth. I'd love to hear what was valuable for you on the workshop. Feel free to give me some feedback or what you would have enjoyed hearing.
Awesome. A lot of great information. I just want to remind everybody to fill out that survey to give us some feedback and let us know how we did so we can improve things for next time. And to do that, you can go to physedagogy.com/PhysEd Summit, and you can find a link to the survey on there. That's also a way to get your certificate for professional development credit. So again, thank you, Krista, for coming on, and thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jorge.